Good morning, impromptu live, because there's no coffee time and I'm going out. I thought I would take this opportunity to continue with part 4 of my story, because I wanted to get us up to what I shared last weekend, which was my 16th anniversary of being sober. So I wanted to take you up to that point. And when I left off on part 3, I was just telling you about the fact that I was working in a bar, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And that's where I met my first husband, who had decided, he told his friend that he was going to marry me one day. And he did. We got married in Barbados, and it was great. But, and there's a big but, I was 21 when we got married. We met when I was 18. I was 19 the following January, and we met in the sort of September, October time. So, I wasn't far off 19, but he was a lot older than me. He was 35, which is a big age difference. Did he behave like a 35-year-old? No. Did I think he was sophisticated and absolutely gobsmacked that somebody like him could find me attractive? Yeah, he was very tall, 6'2", naturally kind of tan skin, dark hair. He did kind of have a look of I think people often would ask, is he from an Italian background? No is the answer. It's just the way that he was. But he just literally, I fell hook, line and sinker, not even realizing that he was married at the time. Yep, that's how naive I was at 18. But the fact that somebody found me attractive and wanted to be with me was what my ego was desperate for. And you've gathered all the way through now that my self-confidence about how I looked and how I felt was ridiculously low. And I explained to you that I had got to that kind of critical low weight, and then put on a lot of weight, and then began to lose it again, went on holiday, and came back and continued back into my pattern of bulimia. Thankfully, the second time in that whole craziness of bulimia, I did not go back to the laxatives, having experienced how horrific it was being on them and how equally horrific it was getting off them. Of course, I now know that the damage that I've done to my gut was just like bonkers. And that's one of the reasons why I had my heart attack when I did, because if your gut's not working right, your body is not going to be absorbing stuff, and stuff's going to be going into your bloodstream that should not be, including calcium, making its way up into the arteries of the heart, which is not where you want it to be. And there's also the reason that I've got my Hashimoto's thyroiditis as well. It's all down to all of that rubbish that I did and continue to do, because at 18 I was still well into this whole bulimia thing. The only difference is this time I was really good at it. I was a lot better. Practice makes perfect, as they say. And I'd got it down to a fine art. I knew how to not just get up what was in my stomach, but I also knew how to get up what was going on further down. And it sounds pretty gross, but until bile came up, I was not happy that I'd got everything up. And it's the acid that was washed over my teeth. Some of you will know that I have had my teeth done. My teeth started to fall out. I was losing them when I was sort of 44, 45, and it got to the point where I'd got 3 missing at the back. And obviously they couldn't see them, but all of the enamel basically was not there, been just eroded away because of what I'd done. Anyway, as usual, I'm digressing, so I don't want this to be as long as the last one. So what I wanted to just kind of say was, yeah, we met, we started going out. Obviously, I did find out that he was married, but his marriage was on the rocks and had been for quite a while. And so we ended up moving in together. And to be quite honest, I just wanted to get away. I wanted to live on my own. The whole situation with my mum being ill and me living with her, my dad and my stepmom being together, making it very clear that they did not want me to live with them because I was a bad influence. It just was like I wanted to get out. And so this, if you like, this was my ticket to get out. And so I lived in a flat with him, and basically he enabled me. He had everything that I thought I would want in a guy. He had money. He drove a Porsche 911. So we used to go out into like like Leeds, top restaurants. We'd go VIP in nightclubs, and I just thought, this is incredible. I was absolutely loving the whole trip. What I didn't realize was that he was screwing around elsewhere as well. So I wasn't the only person that he was sleeping with, and he slept with his wife and got his wife pregnant while we were together. Anyway, even though I knew all of this, right, I did get married to him because, you know what, it just seemed like the way that I wanted to go. And of course, my dad was just like devastated. He was just like, please don't do it. And I said, we're going to go to Barbados, and you're going to get married out there. And I'm like, no, we're not, with every intention that we were going to. And we did. And literally the week we got back, he was sleeping with his hairdresser, and I found out. And it was just like absolute bonkers. But while we were together, this is where I've mentioned quite a few times, people who know my story, especially in networking. How did I get into the world of health and wellness? Well, it's because of this guy, really. So he, as a birthday present, bought me a 1 week gym pass to the gym that he was a member of. Now, I'd seen this gym when we walked through. There's an arcade in Huddersfield called the Imperial Arcade. When you walk through that, there is, when you look up, there's like a kind of balconies and some glass, and you can see that there's workout machines, and it's the gym kind of above this shopping area. And I always kind of was intrigued what it was about and who were the kind of people who went in there. And suddenly I've got this 1 week to go, and of course I was going to make the most of it. So I decided to check it out. I didn't really know what I was doing in the gym at all, to be quite honest, at that point. I'd done my craziness of running and cycling, but other than aerobic work, I didn't know anything about weights or anything like that. I used to aspire to be a ballerina. I did do ballet classes until I was 11, until I decided I was going to stop doing that because I felt too fat, and all my skinny friends in their pink tutus didn't have the sticky out belly and the chafing thighs that I did at sort of 8, 9 and 10 years old. And so I gave up ballet when I was 11, and when I started secondary school, nobody was doing it anyway, and it just didn't fit. So that was it from a kind of sporting and dance background. Anyway, I went and I did these classes, and it was a really lovely instructor. And the classes had different names, but it seemed to be the same instructor, and she seemed to be doing similar stuff. And so arrogant head here, Mrs. Grandiose, was just like in my own head going, well, I can do that. It's dead easy. I can do this job. Right. And I'm sure those of you who've been to my classes or any other instructor's classes probably think the same thing. You just stick some music on, tell people what to do it, and that's it. Anyway, after the second session, she came up to me afterwards and she said, hi, I noticed you were here yesterday. Are you a dancer? And I was like, I was quite chuffed. And I was like, no, I'm not. I said, but actually, I'm really intrigued about how do you get to do what you do? And she said, well, I did a course at the Polytechnic, because that's where you went at the time. She said it was over weekends, and it took me a year to get my exercise to music qualification. And so off I toddled straight away to the library. Don't forget, we didn't have computers then, to try and find out about how I could get a qualification. Now, in my head, I'm like, a year? That's ridiculous. If I want something, I want it now. Right? And that's kind of been the story of my life. Rush in, decide to do something, and I want it yesterday. And so I was doing my research, and I came across this course that was in London. It had only run once, and it's basically the equivalent of what is now a personal training course, but it included the exercise to music qualification as an extra if you wanted to do it. And so in my head, I was like, I'm doing this. So I wrote off, and I got offered an interview in London to go on this course. Now, I can't remember, it was called the PEE, it was called the PEA course, and it was the Physical Education Association course in exercise and health studies. That was the long title of it. And so that was my first qualification. And basically, as I say, it was the equivalent now of a personal training. So we covered posture checks, we covered fitness testing, we covered nutrition. And that, when I started to understand nutrition, was when I realized there was big chunks in my knowledge. I understood about calories. I didn't understand about how the body broke stuff down and how it was utilized and how the muscles worked and all that kind of stuff, and blood sugar balance and all of that. It was all new and fascinating. Now, whilst I was away studying, that was my opportunity to go back to not eating during the daytime and drinking. There was a bar on campus when I got to London. So I did get accepted on this course, and it was 6 weeks. I had to find digs, and I would come back home to see my husband, who I'd already decided our marriage was a sham and I was going to leave him, but I was going to get this bloody qualification first and then decide where it took me. So whilst I was away, who knows what he was doing, but I would go back at weekends, and we kind of were trying to make it work. It wasn't going to work. But I was kind of cool with it. I'd had my fun and it was all right. I was moving on. I was doing something else. I was occupied. And so I got my qualification. Unfortunately, my brother had a friend whose mum wanted to open a gym, but she didn't want it to be any old gym. This before big gym chains, remember. And so she'd been to places like Henlow Grange and Champneys, and she wanted to open somewhere like that in Huddersfield. Now, they had the building. They had a leather goods and a leather sofa sort of shop on the ground floor, and the floor above that was empty, and she wanted to turn that into a gym / treatment center, beauty salon, whatever, and she did. And so my brother said to his friend, hey, I hear your mum's looking for staff. My sister's just qualified as this. So I walked straight into a job in a brand new ladies only gym / health club, the only one of its kind in Huddersfield. And I was absolutely chuffed. Within weeks, I was running the whole of the gym side of things. Within a year, I was running the whole exercise side of things. So I was doing the timetables, I was running the studio and everything else. And I absolutely loved it, because here was my excuse now to exercise legitimately like an idiot, burn off calories. And so I got myself into this crazy, crazy way of living that literally included me smoking a lot, drinking black coffee, exercising all day and into the evening if it was a night shift, and then going out with my husband for dinner and drinking copious amounts of alcohol. And not eating a lot, basically, and throwing up if I felt like it. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. And that's kind of how it was. But through that period of time, my weight began to creep back up and began to stabilize as I understood more about the fact that if I wanted to exercise and I wanted to be fit, I needed to actually get the right fuel into my body. Now, what I didn't have a clue about then was food insensitivities and how my body was reacting to certain things, what was setting me off and triggering me wanting to binge, and so on and so forth. And don't forget, a lot of my calories were coming from alcohol by this point. And I was pretty much a beer and wine drinker. I wasn't a spirits drinker, but my husband and the company that we kept, there was another couple that we used to go out with a lot. We're very much into liqueurs and stuff after dinner, and like to the extent where we would like leave the bottle of liqueur on the table. So that's kind of was my life for quite a while until me and this guy split up. I went back to live with my mum, and the restaurant that we used to go to quite a lot, which was a local one in the town, we knew the owner, and so I used to go there with my mum. And when we'd split up, you know, he came over and I'm really sorry to hear about you and this guy and blah blah blah. And before I know it, I was with this guy. So I literally went from one person to the next, and this guy became my second husband. So he owned the restaurant, and well, the truth of it is he didn't own the restaurant, but he made out that he did, and that's a whole other story. But it's the reason why I was made bankrupt, because he didn't do a good deal, and he didn't get shares in it, and he thought he had, and he didn't understand the whole business side of things. But we were together for quite a long time, and he was also an alcoholic. And of course, I was the first one to point out to him how much he was drinking, because at that point, I wasn't really drinking during the day, to be quite honest. I was drinking in the evenings, but I was drinking to the point of blackout. And it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool to the extent that when I knew my husband, my first husband and I were not going to work things out, I ended up being, doing what I'd done on my 1830s holidays and just being delighted if anybody showed any interest in me. And so I slept with quite a number of people. Well, not great in a town where your family's known, people know who you are. So there would be stuff feeding back about who I'd been out with, who I'd been seen with, where I'd been seen to my dad. It wasn't brilliant. You can see why our relationship kind of didn't work great, because I was just an embarrassment, basically, to the family name and the family business. And my family really didn't want much to do with me, to be quite honest. By this point, it was like, well, they had to, because that's what families do, but they were not impressed. And they let me know in no uncertain terms. But what what did transpire, and this is kind of an important thing that I need to bring in, because because of the fact that I did black out, and I didn't really understand what blackouts was then, to be quite honest. I thought blackouts was passing out, and that's completely different. But blacking out is where you are actually still awake and conversing, but you're just not fully aware and you don't remember what's happening. That's bloody scary. And I was actually raped by somebody who I knew, and I didn't know until the next day, really, twig fully what had happened. Did I do anything about it? No. Was I subsequently raped again by the person that I was with when I moved to London? Yes, I was. And also it broke multiple ribs. So when I say to people, when I talk about my life and what I've been through and the stuff that I've experienced, and I'm not saying this, I'm not dumbing down anything at all, but I was raped, and I have thankfully dealt with it and spoken about it, and I fully comprehend that it was not my fault, but I did open myself up to being very, very vulnerable. And when I look back, I'm absolutely fortunate that it didn't happen more than it actually did, considering the way that I used to behave and just disregarded myself and my body and the situations that I put myself in with people who I thought were different to who they actually were. And I'm not going to kind of touch on that anymore, but except to say, I was very, very lucky. I also had a car accident with that guy, and we flipped over in his Porsche 911 without the top on. It was a Targa top. You could remove the whole top of the thing. And he let somebody who was completely pissed and high drive his Porsche, and literally flew around a bend, lost control. I was in the back seat. We literally went over 3 times and landed up in a field facing the wrong direction. How the hell I came out of that unscathed, and so did my husband, to be honest. It was unreal, because the driver and the passenger, it was not cool. That guy was in hospital. Both of them were in hospital for weeks and weeks and weeks. But this is the stuff where I say, whatever, whoever, the universe has been looking out for me, because there's multiple times where, stuff should have happened. I've overdosed on my mum's medication. I've had my stomach pumped. I took an overdose when I was with my second husband, because I was just, I didn't know how we were going to get out of the situation that we were in with these businesses. And by this point, he was just beyond help, and I didn't know what else to do. So I wanted to check out. And I overdosed seriously. Ended up in a deep vein thrombosis in hospital for a month. Now, you'd have thought, wouldn't you, really? Sensible, supposedly intelligent person that I thought that I was. I'd had the opportunity to be in an environment in a hospital where I wasn't even allowed out of bed to go to the loo in case this blood clot moved and travelled to my lungs or to my heart. So I was away from alcohol for a whole month. I wasn't smoking either for a whole month. You would think, grab that opportunity with both hands. You've been off those substances. Do not go back to them. When I got out, did I go back to both? Yes. Because I'm going to blame, and this is the story I told myself. It's not true, obviously, but in my head, because of my husband, because he was doing it, so I was going to join him. And it's the most ridiculous excuse, but I understand why we fall into this pattern, because we want to be a part of, we want to fit in, we want to belong. If we're with a partner who is doing this stuff, we feel somehow that there is the pressure for us to do the same. Now I'm quite happy to stand in my power and just say, absolutely no way. This is not who I am. This is not what I do. If you want to do it and carry on killing yourself, go ahead. But I didn't have that confidence. And to be quite honest, I liked it. And this is the other thing. And I know when people talk to me now about wanting to stop drinking, it's like, well, do you actually want to stop drinking, or is it that you want to stop feeling out of control around drink? Because that's a different thing. And a lot of them say, well, I enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I really want you to understand that I am not, even though I do not drink, because my body cannot handle it. And if I know that if I drink again, I will probably end up back where I was, if not worse. I'm not prepared to do that. But there are people who drink and drink to excess because of certain life circumstances and certain reasons. doesn't mean that they are alcoholics and that they can't take back control and drink sensibly. And a lot of people do that, and a lot of people have done that very successfully. So I just want you to know, I am not somebody who is absolutely anti-alcohol. I'm just anti-alcohol for me, for my body. It doesn't work. But I didn't know that at the time, and I certainly wasn't going to accept it. Actually, that's a lie. I'm talking rubbish. I did know it. I just didn't know how to stop it, and I didn't want to at that point, because I couldn't comprehend how I could possibly live without it. I didn't have the skill set. I'd been drinking since I was a young teenager, been drinking more and more since I was an older teenager, and definitely a lot more when I was in my 20s. On my honeymoon, I started the day with champagne because I could. It was there. So, you know, to think about even going a day without alcohol was beyond my comprehension, apart from being in an environment like a hospital where it was forced upon me. So how I could possibly stop on my own, I don't know. Hence, I hope you now understand why I am so grateful to the universe for the circumstances that I explained around me ending up in rehab when I was talking to you on the 16th podcast on my 16th sober anniversary, because without that set of circumstances, I honestly don't think I would be here, because I do not believe that I had what it took to go to somewhere like AA on my own and stop in the environment that I was with. Not having that whole space away, I honestly don't think I could do it. And so for anybody out there who has managed to completely quit alcohol, going through AA and staying in their home environment and are managing to cope with all of the triggers and life that still happens, I absolutely applaud you, salute you. You're amazing, absolutely amazing. So I met my second husband and we ended up getting married, and we decided we wanted to try for a kid. He had a son from his first wife. He'd been married before, and he used to stay with us. And I'm not going to go into the details, but the son started to get involved in drugs, and he ended up living with us, and it was all a bit of a disaster. I was told I couldn't have kids. We wanted to try for a family. It wasn't happening. I was told I couldn't have kids, and went for various explorations and stuff, and those of you who've been through that process will probably know that it's quite invasive, and they do all kinds of tests. And basically I was told that my ovaries were blocked and it wasn't going to happen. That was, in my head, another excuse to escalate the amount that I was drinking even more. And so at this point, it was very acceptable for me to now be drinking at least a bottle to 2 bottles of wine a day, probably 3 or 4 or 5 beers as well. And that kind of stayed at that level for quite a long time. So we eventually split up, and I did get pregnant, so they were wrong. I had to leave this guy. I had to declare myself bankrupt. Our business together did not work. Thankfully for me, I was still teaching my classes, and ended up in a situation where at 29, I'm back with my mum. My mum is still living at home. She's still, not great with her illness, though it seems to be managed a little bit more. Though, to be quite honest, we've had some horrific times in and out of hospital the whole time that I was with both of my husbands. There's been some hellish incidents where she's turned up on the doorstep with a carving knife, threatened to kill me, and all kinds of stuff, which I'm not going to go into detail of. But all of this stuff sticks in your head, and you remember how you felt. And every single time I went to visit her in the hospital, it would get harder and harder, to the point that I would go up with cans of beer and sit visiting her in the visiting room with cans of beer until I was asked politely to please not bring beer in, because there were people in there who were alcoholic. But can you imagine the craziness in my head of turning up into a hospital to visit my mum with beer because I couldn't handle seeing her and being in that environment sober? Absolutely bonkers. But we ended up splitting up, and then I moved to London because I met the guy who I moved down south with at my sister's wedding. And so we came down to Wimbledon, went to the wedding, met this guy, and we ended up having a commuting relationship. Within this period, obviously, I said I was pregnant, found out I was pregnant, living with my mum. My blood pressure went sky high, and I had to tell my dad that, you know what, mum was it was not cool. I needed some space away. He offered me the opportunity to go in the caravan for a week to get a break. He had a caravan in the Lake District, and I went there on my own, pregnant. And when I came back, he said, I want you to have a look at this house. And I'd applied for a council house and had a look, and honestly, I just cried. And I know it sounds really arrogant, and if anybody's listening who lives in a council house, that were the ones that they offered me, honestly, weren't fit to put an animal in, and I just couldn't envision myself even handling it. I just couldn't. And to be fair, my dad came with me to look at one, and I think he saw what was on offer, and bless him, he got a house. He bought a house that he'd already got some properties anyway, so he was going to buy it. It was right opposite where his work is, so he was going to buy this property. But he kind of wanted to make out he was doing it for me, and he allowed me to rent it. So here I was, I moved in. I had my daughter, and this is her birthday today that I'm doing this. So 23 years ago, moved into a house on my own for the first time, living on my own at 23. But within a short space of time, as I say, I met this guy. I think Georgina was 1 and a bit when I met him. So I'd been a year on my own and just really muddling through, teaching my classes, freelance in Halifax, in Huddersfield, just working, looking after my daughter, that kind of stuff, and muddling through, but still drinking every single day, still smoking, making ends meet, having to budget. Money was tight as fudge, as you can imagine. When you go bankrupt, and it's different now, but everything is taken off you, or bank accounts or credit cards. So the only way that I could get paid from my freelance work was either in cash, or if they wanted to pay me a check, I'd have to pay it into a post office. I was allowed a post office account, and I managed like that for a flipping long time, I can tell you. And this is why I have this thing about owing people money now and working in cash where possible, because I need to know exactly what I've got, what's coming in, what's going out, and I'm a bit of a stickler on that. But I met this person when I came to London, and that's it. And we commuted for 2 years, and he had a great job in a bank high up in a huge, I'm not going to say which one, but a big firm. But when I got down there, I realized that, you know what, commuting in a relationship is one thing, living with somebody is a completely different story. And I was stuck. I knew that my dad didn't want me to go back to Huddersfield. He saw it as a fresh start and kind of like, thank God she's gone. Get rid of her. Don't need to hear about her antics in the town, or hear about where she's been and what she's up to. And so I was kind of stuck and knew that this was not what I wanted to do. It was not where I wanted to be. He told me I didn't need to work. He gave me a credit card. He gave me an A to Z of London. And then when I'm out at work at 7, I come home at 10, and I'll see you at weekends. I go and visit my mum. Whoa. So I got some classes. I got work. My daughter was at school in Hampstead. We lived in Belsize Park, and I was as unhappy as I don't know what. And so my escalation in drinking was bonkers, to the extent that after a year he put me in rehab. And I went to the Nightingale Hospital, and it was bonkers. It was absolutely ridiculous. I was there because he wanted me to be, not because I wanted to be. I was so arrogant and determined that, you know, if I was going to do it, I was going to do it. But I walked out of that building 3 times. Nobody even knew that I'd gone. I could have bought alcohol, could have done anything. I didn't. But I just wasn't in the right headspace. And so when I came back and he told me that I was as boring as hell not drinking, I was just like, what the fudge? So I ended up meeting somebody else. And this was the person who I ended up living with. I let this person know that I met somebody else, hence the rape and the broken ribs, and he chucked me out. And we found a house to rent, but this guy was married too, very unhappily. We were together for 3 years, pretty much, until that incident. And I kind of knew after the first year, when he was going on holiday with his wife and wanting me to be okay with it and still living with me, it was just like, what? That I knew that this was just not going to work. But it says a lot about where my personal self-worth was, where my self-esteem was. And so the incident of the bank holiday weekend 16 years ago happened, and thank goodness that it did. And I am here sober to tell the tale. And now you're pretty much up to date, folks. So what I will do is share what kind of happened just in one final to round everything off, about my soiree, whatever word you want to choose to use, my whole journey into the world of health, wellness, and exploring more, and why I do kind of what I do now. Because my food issues did not completely disappear in rehab. They were just, if you like, abated for a while. And I'll share more with you on the next one. But thank you for listening. For those of you who have been listening to all parts, I hope you are getting something from it. And if you've got any comments or questions, or you want to have a conversation with me about anything that I've shared, particularly today, because I know I've touched on some stuff that may trigger for some of you, please do. And on that note, have a great day. I intend to. Bye.